In Israel, unprecedented political crisis is unraveling. The parliament is expected to dissolve this week, triggering new elections later this year. The elections will be the fifth Israel has held in 3 years. Once parliament dissolves, Israel's caretaker government will be headed by Foreign Minister Yair Lapid. Lapid will take over later this week. Ahead of the dissolution, Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett convened his weekly cabinet meeting on Sunday for what was likely his last as premier. At the meeting, Bennett listed a series of accomplishments under his government for the elections that are expected around the end of October. Opinion polls predict former Premier Benjamin Netanyahu's Likud party will garner the most seats. Amidst the political developments in Israel, a number of key international developments linked to Israel and West Asia are currently unfolding. While Israel battles the political storm, efforts by the EU are on to break an impasse between Tehran and Washington over reinstating the 2015 nuclear pact. European Union Foreign Policy Chief Josep Borrell met Iran's top diplomat over the weekend. As world powers prepare to reconvene talks in Vienna, there's also a reported divide within Israel over the nuclear deal talks. Senior defense officials, including Israel's military intelligence chief, have backed revival of Iran deal. Several Israeli generals have begun to support a return to the 2015 accord between Iran and world powers. Israel's government is fiercely opposed to Iran's nuclear program. The 2015 deal is against Israel's official policy. Successive Israeli governments have warned for decades that Iran seeks to build a nuclear weapon. Ahead of the resumption of tattered nuclear talks, Iran carried out a second test launch of a satellite carrier. It's unclear when exactly the rocket was launched, but the announcement came after satellite photos showed preparations at a desert launch pad. It was the second launch of the Zoljana satellite carrier. On foreign policy front, Arab-Israeli diplomacy appears to be at an all-time high. As reports suggest, Israel took part in unprecedented meetings with Arab states about Tehran and Iranian threats. In March, Israel took part in a secret US-initiated meeting of top military officials from throughout the Middle East. A meeting with US CENTCOM Chief Mackenzie was held in Egypt. It was also attended by Arab countries including Saudi Arabia and Qatar, which aren't a part of the Abraham Accords. All sides discussed ways to combat the shared threat of Iran's missile and drone capabilities. It was the first time that such a range of senior Arab and Israeli officers were gathered by the United States to talk about a shared threat. And for more on this, our correspondent Jody Cohen has sent us this report from Ranana. Take a look.
Despite the process of the dissolution of Israel's parliament, the government can't afford to take its eye off the ball when it comes to Iran. With the nuclear talks expected to resume this week, a report suggests some senior Israeli intelligence officials prefer to see a revived Iran deal to buy more time. But they're thought to be in the minority, with the IDF chief and Mossad strongly opposed to what they see as a return to a bad deal. Meanwhile, the US reportedly convened a summit back in March of Israeli and Arab countries' senior defense officials to discuss Iran defense coordination, including Saudi Arabia and Qatar, who currently don't recognize Israel. On Monday, the Negev summit partners are meeting in Bahrain to discuss further cooperation, and the US is said to be working on a Saudi-Israel roadmap to normalization in advance of President Biden's visit to West Asia in July. So while domestically things are uncertain, on the foreign affairs front, it appears to be business as usual. This is Jody Cohen for WION World as One.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.